Hello and good morning or good day, everyone. Welcome to the program that we have for you this morning, Nonprofit Sustainability, Building Blocks to Organizational Success. My name is Tara Palacios, and I'm the Director of Arlington's Nonprofit Resource Center, and we welcome you here with our friends from the Foundation Center and Arlington County Public Library. We're really looking forward to digging deep into the issue of nonprofit sustainability today. Now, there are a few logistics that we'll be going through for today's webinar. Currently, all attendees will be placed in listen-only mode until the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If you have questions throughout or during the webinar, feel free to type that question into the chat window. We're looking forward to hearing from everybody. We will be moderating those questions at the end of the webinar with our very own colleague here, Melissa O'Connor. And we'll be recording the presentation. So if you don't stay with us at some point or you need to drop off, we will have the Nonprofit Sustainability webinar up on our web pages by the end of this week. If later on you have additional questions regarding this topic matter, feel free to contact our friends at the Foundation Center. I've got Jeanette Norton's contact information right there, and she'll be able to answer those questions or direct you to the right person at the Foundation Center. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you today to our speaker, Kim Patton, who is now the Director of the Foundation Center Northeast Division. Congratulations, Kim, on your promotion, and we're so glad that you're here with us today. A little background on Kim. Kim is responsible at this time for creating, managing, and delivering programs in the DC metro region and also on the national level. She was chosen to do international presentations for the center in both Nigeria and Trinidad. Prior to joining the Foundation Center in 2007, Kim worked for high-profile nonprofit organizations such as the Hawaii Public Television, the Council on Foundations, and the National Endowment for the Arts. She was most recently the Executive Director of a Grassroots Mediation Center, and prior to that, she raised money through grants and corporate sponsorships for major public events, such as Artscape and the Baltimore Book Festival, both awesome events. She holds a law degree from Capital University in Columbus, Ohio, and a BA in Communications from the University of Cincinnati. We welcome with us today Kim Patton, the Director of the Foundation Center Northeast Division, and really, really proud to have her talking on this really hot topic today. If you have questions or want to interact with us more, you can follow us on our hashtag, BizLaunch Chat, and we'll be interacting with you throughout, and any questions or anything, make sure you put those in the chat window. Right now, I'm going to turn over the presentation to our friend Kim Patton, who is our illustrious speaker for today, and looking forward to hearing more from you, Kim.
Thank you so much, Tara. I really appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for being with me today, this very beautiful day after St. Patrick's Day. I feel like this is a nice day to be having a webinar in case all of you are out way too late last night drinking green beer, as I know I was. So at least we can be in the comfort of our offices or our homes or wherever we are today. So thank you for joining me. Today is Nonprofit Sustainability, Building Blocks to Organizational Success, and it is a very hot topic for many reasons because we are all looking to be more sustainable, our organizations, our programs, our services, and so we're going to talk about how to do that today. But first, I want to talk about what is nonprofit sustainability because we talk about it a lot, and I think we kind of know what it is, but our definition here is to not only avoid bankruptcy and surviving crisis. So a lot of us feel like we can barely do that right. I know. We often feel like we are behind the 8 ball and can barely keep up. So one of the cornerstones of nonprofit sustainability is to not only be able to avoid bankruptcy, but to also be able to survive crisis, because change is a part of running a nonprofit always. So being able to have some reserves, cash reserves, to be able to survive those tough times, but also maintaining effective programs and services and having the internal capacity to grow and expand. Because sustainability does not necessarily mean just staying where you are. We want to have enough resources to be able to do all of the wonderful things that we have on the horizon and are planning to do, but don't know where we're going to get the funding for to do it. So that's what will help answer some of your questions for that today, I hope. So here are the key elements of sustainability: adaptive capacity, program capacity, leadership capacity, and financial capacity. And in that order, actually, we will be taking a look at each of those building blocks. A lot of people are kind of surprised that the financial capacity is at the very end, because a lot of people think this class is going to be just about finances and financial resources, which are very, very important to all of us. But we feel like if you don't have the first three blocks in place, it's going to be hard for you to get the resources you need. You kind of have to prove yourself first, and then, you know, you will be able to attract more funders. It's sort of like the if you build it, they will come kind of scenario. So we're going to start first with adaptive capacity and what that means. So you really have to, adaptive capacity means the ability to monitor, assess, and respond to external changes. And the farther you can see over the horizon in terms of what some of those things might be, the more ready you are when change comes. So this is all about change and being able to anticipate change and know what you need to have in place when those changes come, both internally and externally. So we'll look at how you go about doing that. So oftentimes we talk about doing a SWOT analysis. Many of you probably have heard of that. And for those of you who haven't, it's taken from the business world and it's actually a tool that businesses use to sort of, you know, assess their marketing, their target audiences, and, you know, how to attract those target audiences. And so it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I often like to look at threats more like challenges, so sometimes I say that instead of threats, but that's what SWOT means. So that really should be a big part of your strategic planning process, is to look at those things. And you really should do this on a regular basis with your board, your staff, your volunteers, even some of your key donors. Really take a look at the questions that we are going to look at here. I know a lot of us feel like, well, we're too busy doing our programs and services and trying to write proposals, and we're wearing way more hats than we have time for anyway. But you will find that if you don't plan, then you can't really see your future. You can't really plan for your future. So a big part of sustainability is planning for the future. So we'll look at the SWOT analysis and some questions that you should ask yourself. So under strengths is, what do you do well? What unique resources can you draw on? So this is really being able to clearly identify and talk about what your key strengths are. Sometimes we talk about the competitive edge, and we'll talk more about that later, but that's what we mean. What's your competitive edge? What is your unique quality, your unique characteristics that you do better than anyone else? And so you really have to clearly know what those are and be able to articulate that. On the bottom of the slide, you do see that it says under strengths, what do others see as your strengths? So we also have that under weaknesses as well, and under challenges too. So that's really where your board comes in, your staff comes in, your volunteers come in, your major donors come in, because sometimes we can't see these things for ourselves. Even our strengths sometimes, even as people, it's hard for us to see what are our strengths if we had to really say to somebody what our strengths are. And sometimes we have blind spots to what our weaknesses are as well. So it's really good to pull people into this process. I have a saying that I use in my individual giving class that says, if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. So what that means is, if you're asking for money from people, foundations, corporations, and you really haven't taken a good look at why you need the money, you'll get a whole lot of advice and questions about, why should we give this money to you over someone else. And the other part of that is, if you want money, ask for advice, is a lot of times when we're looking at our strengths and weaknesses and challenges, we will often ask our stakeholders, our donors, our volunteers, our staff, so that they feel more in part and involved in the process. So, that way they don't feel like you only come to them when you're asking for money. So this is a good way to pull in your current funders and donors as well, and even board, to just get them more engaged in what it is that you're raising money for. In my class, Your Board and Fundraising, that's also one of the reasons why boards aren't as involved as they should be, can be in the process, because often they're not involved in this stage of the game, in this stage of the strategic planning process, so that everyone can see where we're headed and why we're heading there. So that's why you should really pull as many people into this process as possible. Opportunities then are, what opportunities are open to you, not only just today, but also in the future? What trends do you see that you can take advantage of? And how can you turn your strengths into opportunities? So once you know what your competitive edge is, part of what you want to do is to maintain that competitive edge. So looking for opportunities where you can build upon your strengths. Now let's look at the weaknesses and threats side, because that's a side that a lot of people don't really want to look at sometimes. Even us as people, we don't like to look at our weaknesses or challenges that we might have in our lives. But it's a really good idea to take a look at those, and to take a look at those as soon as possible. Bad news doesn't get better over time. It just gets worse and makes it harder to deal with. So it's good to sort of take a couple of steps back sometimes and really look at your weaknesses. What could you improve on? Where do you have fewer resources than other people? Threats then are, what threats could harm you in the future? What is your competition doing? So, and what threats do your weaknesses expose you to? So sometimes your weaknesses can turn into challenges as well. So let's look at it from a library point of view. So if we look at opportunities, we can see, what trends could you take advantage of? So way back in the day, it sounds like, way back in the day now, it's hard to believe how fast technology goes, but sort of e-books were just, and Kindles and things like that were just coming on the horizon, and it put a lot of bookstores out of business because of that. The one that didn't go out of business was Barnes & Noble, who had sort of a head start on the e-book game because of the whole development of the Kindle, and they kind of took advantage of that. So really, they had to start really looking at those trends way before it came up. They had to really look far over the horizon to see what would that mean to us. And libraries were kind of faced with the same things in a lot of ways. So if you take that opportunity and look at that as under the weakness category, you might say, well, we don't have the technology, we don't have the capacity, we have some ideas of how we could keep up with that trend, but currently we don't have the technology or the capacity. So that could be one of the things that could be a threat to you in the future. So many, many libraries, almost all of them now, I think, have caught on to the e-book trend and turned that opportunity or that challenge into funding opportunities. So that's really how I look at weaknesses and threats. Being able to identify them are also funding opportunities. So if you look at it now, you can come up with a plan of, how you're going to be able to, keep up with that kind of technology. And if you have a good enough plan, funders would be interested in supporting that. So that's really why you need to take a good look at all of that and see how you can, create opportunities for funding, both from your strengths and your weaknesses side of things. So don't look at it as a negative. Look at it as a positive way to be able to create new ways for you to be able to grow and expand. The other thing about the SWOT analysis is you want to make sure that it's a living document that you don't just do once. Some people, we do that, and we come up with these great brainstorming ideas, and then we don't, take those ideas further. We don't turn it into some kind of plan. So when you do this, it should become a part of your strategic plan, your fundraising plan, and things like that. It should be something that you revisit from time to time, so you can look at, where are we now in terms of our strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and are we on track to kind of building a sustainable organization based on those things. So next, let's see, yes. So the use of this information from the SWOT analysis, you can use it to help you to identify what your competitive edge is, and to create a case for funding opportunities, which we had just talked about. So with that information, you can build your program capacity. So the trend these days is really where funders are looking at, what's your measurable impact. It's such an important part of fundraising, to not only know your competitive edge, but to know, how what you're doing is changing lives. So this SWOT analysis and really looking at your programs to see, number one, do you really fully understand the needs of your customers? Not only as it is today, but what might their future needs be? And how will that help you to inform the kinds of programs and services that you need to provide based on those needs, and kind of get ahead of the curve in that way? You can't keep doing things the same old way and keep up with future trends. So really thinking about that in enough time so that you can build a funding base for that. And also, in terms of measuring, you really have to think about, how your efforts are making a difference. That's really what funders are looking for these days. How are your efforts making a difference, which gets into the whole idea of creating measurable impact. So the first thing to realize is this is not really just about numbers. So for years, a lot of us have just been into, how many people actually come in to your libraries and really keeping track of that. And we do the same thing here. We can talk about how many people come in to use the database, how many people come to take our free trainings. But now what funders really want to know is how is that changing lives, families, and communities. So that's what we mean by impact, not just in numbers, but how it's changing the quality of life, environment, or experience. So really thinking about that. Sometimes those kinds of things can be a little hard to measure, but you need to start thinking about, how you will be able to measure those kinds of things. And that gets us to the next bullet point, which is proxy measures. So when we talk about proxy measures, we're talking about it in terms of being able to measure things that sometimes aren't really measurable. For example, if we talk about things like, how many homeless people are we feeding? That's a really easy thing to measure. We can say these are how many people that come into our homeless shelter, and the impact is that, people don't, go hungry. So that's an easy thing to measure. But if we're talking about something like measuring teen pregnancy, for example, or let's say measuring the self-esteem, let's start there with teenage girls, for example. How would you measure something like that? So proxy measures just means that some of it will be quantitative and some of it will be qualitative. I mean, some of it will be about things that you can measure, and other things will be more subjective things. So for example, we'd have to look at, how many girls we serve, number one, but what kinds of things would show us that demonstrate, that's why on the third bullet point it's important to show an understanding of how your activities and programs create results, to really show what the impact is being. So in this way, some quantitative measures could be, how many times they don't skip class, so keeping track of attendance, keeping track of detention, so they have spend less time in detention, keeping track of their grades to show that there's an improvement in their grades, keeping track of school activities and events, so they are now being more involved in social activities and events, talking to their teachers to find out participation in class and things like that have improved. But there also may be things like their appearance, their relationships with their peers, their sense of self, so that they're setting more goals than they used to. They feel better about themselves, so that could be tracked from journals and peer group discussions and things like that, so that you can say, building a girl's self-esteem, how does this help them be better in life? So setting goals will help them to maybe go to college, but that starts with getting better grades. And once they go to college, they drastically improve the quality of their life in that way. So that's what we mean by proxy measures, and it's going to change based on what subject area you're trying to measure. So starting out, you really want to talk about, what kinds of things are going to really show the impact that we're going to make, and really think through that and be able to collect and analyze the data related to what it is that you're trying to measure. You want numbers, but you also want to tell compelling stories about who you're helping and why. So that's really a big important part of what funders are going to be looking for. Leadership capacity is important as well. So we often say that people give to people, and what that means is that funders are people too. They're going to be giving to not only the people you serve, but the people in charge of your organizations. I know a lot of funders that say they kind of go with the leader of an organization. So they funded an organization for a while, and when that leader leaves, their money goes with it because they know that that leader is going to be the one that really help move the programs and services forward. They are the ones that are going to create and sustain the vision, inspire others, make priorities and good decisions made on cost effectiveness, and will really drive the direction of the organization as a whole. And really, in terms of sustainability, thinking of creative and innovative ways to kind of attack challenges and problems and move the organization forward. So good leadership is really a very important part of sustainability. So succession planning is one of those big buzzwords that funders are using as well, and that a lot of people have to start thinking about for a couple of reasons. One of the main problems or issues with sustainability, particularly with nonprofit organizations, is there is a high burnout and turnover rate. So at any given time, you might have new leadership, new staff, new people running programs and projects, and a lot of times that's kind of hard for funders to keep up with. Also, sometimes we've had really good leaders in place that we don't want to don't want to lose, but eventually they have to retire and move on. So we just want to make sure that our leaders, there's a succession plan that when people take over new roles or you get new staff, that the history of the organization doesn't go with that, so that you have a way of sort of grooming the next person that takes place and kind of introducing them to funders ahead of time. So I know Tara told you about my new promotion, and I'm very excited about that. Our old director, Pasquale, is no longer with us. She's moved on, but we sent out notifications to all of our funders about that, to our community collaborations and partners about that, because they're going to want to know, who I am and how long I've been around, so that they can have trust, as much trust in my abilities as they did in Pat. So that's a very important part of sustainability, is making sure that the baton is passed correctly, and there's a lot of communication around that. So I have worked here for about 8 years, and me and Pat have worked side by side for that period of time. And so communicating that to our partners, collaborators, and funders will help with that transition and succession. So that's one important aspect to keep in mind as well. So let's talk about financial capacity. So financial capacity is really important too. And the main thing that you have to keep in mind with financial capacity is that you have to have enough money to not only survive and maintain operations, but pay for internally and externally generated change and growth. So, you know, it takes money. So all this plans that we have from our SWOT analysis is just going to take, you know, time and money. And that's why planning ahead is really helpful in that way. We have something that we call our 2020 vision. You know, we do SWOT analysis here. So we decided, you know, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are some of the challenges that we see in the future. And so we have a strategic plan for what we want to look like in 2020 based on that information. And so we start raising money now based on what our plan is for the future. So, you know, it's good to have those plans in place, but you need to have the resources as well to kind of stay ahead of that game. So how do you do that? First off, we talk about diversifying your fundraising, your revenue streams. And so some of you probably have seen these slides before if you've taken classes from us before, but it's very important here because I'm telling you the trend for the future is not to rely on foundation grants. I know that, you know, bursts a lot of people's bubbles, but it's the truth. They you know, it's a very competitive world. They have limited resources just like we do, and they have more and more people, you know, really wanting those resources. So it's important to know that you can't sustain a nonprofit with just foundation support. So you really have to think beyond that. And so we have up here, you know, where money comes from to support nonprofits, you know, government grants, government contracts, investment income, which is if you have an endowment or something like that, which is the goal that we should all be striving for, is to have enough money in our reserves that we can have an endowment. We'll talk in a minute about how we get to that very heavenly state that we have enough money to do that. But you can get income off the interest of that. Other income can mean like memberships or, you know, something like that. Some people have those kinds of things. Sometimes fundraising events fall under there as well. And the biggest category is fees for goods and services. So a lot of sustainable nonprofits have ways that they're earning income for themselves. So you really have to think from a really entrepreneurial point of view. As a matter of fact, it's called social entrepreneurship, this whole area, because it's where, you know, nonprofits have to really, you know, think very business-minded in terms of how they're going to earn income and at the same time being socially responsible. So we don't want to, you know, look like and act like corporations in that way, but we really have to think about how we can earn income for ourselves, and that's what that area is called, is earned income. That's what we mean for fees and services from private sources, because it usually comes from individuals, and corporations in that way. But it's really not necessarily charging fees for what we do, but you can do that as well. We charge fees for our services. We have fee-based classes. You know, we do offer a lot for free, but we also have fee-based classes. That's a fee for our service. So is Foundation Directory Online. When people want to just have access to it anytime, anywhere online, that is, you know, a fee for that particular service. Also, you can sell goods of any kind, so T-shirts and mugs and, you know, backpacks and anything like that. So, you know, museums do that really well. When you come out of a wonderful exhibit or even a performance, you end up in the gift shop, or you end up somewhere where you can, you know, buy a memento from the great time that you had there. that's their earned income. Salvation Army, you know, and Goodwill, their thrift stores are their earned income, because even though you're buying the beautiful scarf for $1, they have some wonderful things in those thrift stores, by the way. What did they pay for it? Nothing. And it's a bargain for you for $1, but, you know, that's their earned income. My favorite example are Girl Scout cookies, because they have made that into a multi-million-dollar cookie dynasty. But, you know, it's an earned income that quite honestly started as a bake sale in someone's backyard, really. So what I want to say about all of that is that, you know, when you think of Girl Scout cookies, for example, that in a way becomes their brand and their visibility too. So every time somebody, you know, wears your T-shirt, drinks from your mug, you know, carries your umbrella, you know, or whatever it is, that carries your tote bag, you know, that's visibility and brandability for your organization, which is really, really important. A lot of people think too, because I always tell people, I taught proposal writing yesterday, there's hard to get general operating support from foundations. It just is, which goes back to measurable impact, because they really want to see, instead of paying for your building and your overhead expenses, which just isn't all that attractive to them. And two, they want to show how, you know, the programs and services are directly helping people, so it's better for them to measure their impact if the money is going to a specific program or project. But what a lot of us need in terms of sustainability is, you know, to pay for our general operating support. So a lot of nonprofits that have earned income use most of that money to pay for their general operating support. That's just what we do with it, because if we can get a lot of that covered, we can spend, you know, more time raising, you know, money for specific programs and projects, which we know foundations love anyway. So earned income is also a way for you to kind of get, you know, ahead of that sort of general operating curve and use that money for that. And, you know, the only thing about earned income is it has to go directly back into your, you know, mission, your programs and services, and that's why we don't call it a profit. But you can absolutely earn income. A lot of people think because we're a nonprofit you can't do that, but you absolutely can. And so that means that you can cover your general operating support. It doesn't have to go directly toward the program. So that's a good thing to really sort of wrap your brain around and start thinking about in terms of where, you know, the future money is going to come from. So if we look at, I'm just going to go back real quick, if we look at the private contributions category, the 13.3% of private contributions, that looks like this. Most of it's coming from individuals, bequests, or just planned gifts, and, you know, the rest is coming from corporations and foundations. So you can see that you can't, even more reason why you just can't rely solely on foundation grants. And in terms of earned income, most of the money, you know, for that earned income, the things that you're going to be selling, the products and services, are going to come from individuals. So that's why that's a big category as well. A good example are hospitals and universities. They're in this category as well because they charge a fee for their services. Tuition is their fee for service. You know, the medical bills are their fee for service. So, you know, it still would be the largest category even if they weren't in there, but they just are very good at charging fees for their services. So individuals, too, are also going to be more loyal and committed to your organization over time, and so they can be, you know, the most consistent source of support other than foundations and corporations. So just some things to think about as you think about how are we going to get money to support all the things that we want to do. So when we talk about diversifying your funding mix, you want to have more than one type of funding stream with several players, should be players. Well, maybe it's payers. I like payers, several payers, because they're going to be helping us to pay for our programs and services. So several players or payers in each type. So what that means is when you're looking at, individuals, corporations, foundations, earned income, government, public support, you want to make sure that you're just not relying on one type of support. So you might be relying heavily on government support, for example, and you really want to get away from that and see how you can add new players into your mix. And it might not be all of those sources. We don't get a lot of money from government. We just don't. But we get a lot from corporations, foundations, and starting to move more into the individual giving category. So it doesn't mean that you're going to have an equal mix of all of those things, but you definitely need to have, at least 2 or 3 types of funding. So one dominant support of source plus 2 or 3 other supporting streams. So our dominant support is, let's see, foundations, I would say, and the other 2 are like, earned income and corporations. So also having more than one player in that mix. So if you're relying on government support, not just relying on one government agency to do it, or if you're relying on foundation support, not just relying on one foundation, but having more than one stream under each of those categories. And even with earned income, we have more than one kind of earned income stream. So that way, as change comes, which it will, you won't just be relying on 1 or 2 sources. You'll have a backup plan because you'll have support coming from other sources as well. So in diversifying your funding mix, you just want to look at what funding partners do you currently have, which funding partners are viable for your funding mix, because not all are going to support all causes. But fortunately for libraries, that's a feel-good cause. That's, education and literacy and, families and children that people really like. But sometimes you have a controversial issue that, you're not going to get corporate support for because they don't want to, risky sort of issues. So you have to really think about who's viable for your funding mix, what partners will provide the most long-term security, what level of support can you expect from each partner. So just kind of thinking about, if you've never, gone into the foundation field, you might want to start small. The likelihood of you getting a huge grant from a foundation when you're just for general operating support, when you just step into the waters, aren't that great. So you're going to have to kind of build upon that support. So really starting off small and then kind of working your way up based on the success that you have really entering into those waters. So for example, we want to start looking at individual support to diversify our funding streams. And we still want it to be voluntary, so we thought about that. We don't want to start charging people to have to take classes and things like that. But we want to do something like, where they can, designate us, through the United Way or something like that, or having an online button on our website where people can just voluntarily make a contribution. So when we first look at that category, our expectations are pretty low because we don't know, how much support we can expect from individuals. But once we try it out, for a year or 2, we'll have a better idea of what strategies are working and what aren't working. So that's kind of how you have to enter into a new funding stream. And then think about how much time and money will it take to secure additional partners or funding streams. Earned income takes a lot of time and effort. It takes a certain amount of capacity to be able to do that. So you have to kind of think about what things we need to have in place before we start, entering into that vehicle and sort of planning ahead for that. So you see the importance of really, planning ahead. So once you diversify your funding streams, which is, a really important aspect of sustainability, you have to think about building a surplus for your organization. And I know a lot of us are saying we can barely pay the bills now, so how do we build a surplus? So the first thing you need to do is really change the we never have enough mentality. A lot of nonprofits really just feel like, well, we're nonprofits, so we just always have to be begging and, scraping for pennies, which is not the case. So you really can, in a budget, allow 5% of your budget or 10% of your budget to be set aside for an annual surplus. Yes, you can do that. it's kind of like when they say, pay yourself first out of your paycheck. You're never going to get ahead of the game if you don't pay yourself first, because there's always going to be bills to pay and more bills to pay if you allow that. So that's why they say take out the 5 or 10% first, and then, that's your surplus, that's your reserves, and then you'll see how much you have left to pay the bills with. So really having this conversation with your board, develop policies, to sort of say that's okay for us to have surpluses and reserves. So what's our strategy for achieving those goals, and what's our timeline for putting that in place? And investing in income generation, and that's just the whole earned income conversation. So how do you get the money? So like any of us, if we're setting aside our budget, we're looking at our budget for the year, and we say, well, where are we going to get the 5% of money to sort of set aside? Where is that going to come from? Because, I'm living paycheck to paycheck and barely have enough money to cover the bills now. Well, this is what we kind of came up with, and we love it. It's called the Mission Money Matrix, and the truth is, I don't know if we came up with it, but probably not. But it is, a good tool to use, and we love it. So you just kind of sit down and look at your current programs and services and divide them into these 4 quadrants, which can be a very interesting process, by the way. It can be fun and also very revealing at the same time, because a lot of us just take the budgets we have last year and just assume we want to carry that over and do the same thing the same way this year. But it's hard to have a sustainable organization based on that for many, many reasons. So instead of doing that, we kind of look at our budget each year and see how we're spending and allocating resources and see how they could be better allocated or spent. So all this is the bottom area is just financial contribution. So some things are higher or lower in terms of how much financial contribution they're actually bringing into the organization. Some things actually drain your financial resources, and other things can help you maybe garner more financial resources. So that's what that bottom arrow indicates. The side arrow indicates how high is it on your mission. So let's go through some of these things and talk about what we mean. So the Saints are programs that are high on your mission, but low in terms of how much financial contribution they bring in for the organization. So our Saints, for example, here, maybe I feel like our scholarship programs for people who can't afford to pay for our fee-based classes. They're full-day classes. Some of them are three days, and I think it would be great for people who can't afford them to actually be able to attend them, because it's much more in-depth information they would get from our free classes, which are great, but sometimes you want a little more. But it's hard for us to raise money for that, and I think it's just because, our impact might be, 20 organizations, if we're lucky, if we can raise that much for them, 20 individuals, I should say, versus, hundreds of people that come through our door. So, compared to hundreds of people, it's hard to make a convincing argument for, 10 or 20 people that need scholarships to attend our classes. So it's Saints because it's higher on our mission, but it doesn't bring in much money. A star could be like Foundation Directory Online. Yay! And the reason it's a star is because it brings in money for us because people can get subscriptions to them, but it's also a star because it's really high up on our mission in terms of what we do. Dogs are things that are low on your mission and low in terms of bringing in money. So it drains a lot of your financial and staff resources for no reason. So a lot of times people kind of say that fundraising events sometimes can be a dog because it takes up a whole lot of time and effort, or galas and things like that, but it's really not high on your mission, and it really, you don't get enough ticket sales to make it worth your while. Cash cows, on the other hand, can also be similar, like events and things like that bring in a lot of money. I hear examples of that as well, where they don't want to stop doing it because, it does bring in a lot of money, like a golf tournament or something like that, but it does still take up a lot of time and resources away from programs and services that can, give us the measurable impact that we need. So sometimes I say, is there a way to push the cash cows higher up on the mission contribution list by maybe, having an awards at that particular luncheon or banquet or something like that, where you can bring in a lot, more of what your mission is and what it is you do, and really expose everybody that's at the event to what it is that you do in your mission. And maybe even get, put them on your annual giving list later, so because they're at your event, they like you, and that you can build upon those relationships later. So, kind of combining your mission with the financial contributions to kind of make them a star. So that's really things to think about. And, what are we going to do with the dogs? We're either going to make them cash cows or stars or get rid of them. So that could free up some time, some money that you can put toward your reserves, just freeing up some of that money. So once you have, and just go back a little bit, so once you have sort of your reserves, so 5 or 10% is your surplus, you really want to, just like with our personal contributions, our personal budgets, you really want to have enough money saved up to pay for at least 6 to 9 months of your general operating expenses. So you need to do that before you start talking about endowments and all that kind of good stuff. You have to at least have enough to pay for your bills for at least 6 to 9 months. Some of us, a year worth of savings to be able to kind of, that'll be your sort of nest egg to kind of cover any kind of, economic downturns or a loss of a grant or something like that. You have like a savings account in that way. Once you have that kind of established, so you have at least 6 to 9 months up to a year of surplus reserves, then you can start having designated funds. So once I have a savings account, I can then start designating funds, for my children's college or my retirement or a vacation, or that sounds good right about now, or something like that. So what that means for you guys is you can begin to think, okay, well, let's have a reserve for technology. Start a fund where we can put money toward our technology needs or building needs, or an endowment. You can start thinking about, establishing that once you have enough cash flow and cash reserves on hand to be able to designate certain funds for certain very specific things that are on your wish list. And that's how you start doing that. A lot of people feel like, well, if we have that much money set aside, we have an endowment, can we still get money from foundations and corporations and grants? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the things they most look for are financially sustainable organizations, organizations that they know that if we invest in this program or service, they're going to be around for a while. We're not investing in something that's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. So they like organizations that can show that they're very sound and stable financially, and also that you're not relying on them so much for your general operating support, because a lot of people like that about organizations like the American Red Cross, the Foundation Center, the Girl Scouts, because they feel like their money can go directly toward, helping those cute little girls instead of, paying for overhead. So it's a good thing to be in a strong financial position with funders. And in order to do that, you need to have a fundraising plan. And you just kind of start with the foundation of what I've given you here. Think about who are your strongest funding sources now and who can you add to that mix. Set a goal for each of the revenue strategies. So what's your goal from foundations, corporations, individuals, earned income? Think through the details of who, when, where, and how is this going to happen, and create a chart or narrative setting out those specific goals, who's going to be responsible for them, when are these tasks going to be accomplished. So we're going to take it just from a theoretical point of view to an actual plan that is set in place to accomplish a lot of these things. And then last but not least, you have to look at that too over time to see what's working and what's not. Was the money raised worth the expenditure of time and effort? Because sometimes it takes a lot of time and money to raise money. And some certain strategies you're going to get better and more results of than other strategies. But you have to really think through that and give yourself, some time to kind of work toward that. So you work small, start small, and kind of work your way up, looking at what's working and what didn't work this year, which is going to lay the groundwork for your strategies next year. And as you just get better at doing this, your successes will begin to build on one another. So that's it for me for now. I definitely want to save some time for Q&A, which is a very important part of this discussion. So I am going to turn things back over to Tara for some questions. Hello? Hello?
Oh, we're so sorry about that. Somebody hit off and the volume just went away.
Okay. I'm like, hello? No questions? Wow. I'm like, I must have put everybody to sleep. I know it's the day after St. Patty's Day, but okay.
I was so ready to tell you, Kim, what a wonderful job you did and what great information there was, and then I just disappeared.
Right.
But we did get some great questions, and I'm going to hand it over to Melissa. Thank you, Kim. That was really great information, and we got a couple of really good questions.
Yes, thank you. First, to address quite a few questions I got, we did record this webinar, and we're going to make it available to everyone, and we'll be sending out the info on how to access that by the end of the week. So first question we got for you is, when starting a nonprofit, what is your best guess on how long it will take to establish the capacity concept that you presented today?
Yes. So when you're starting a nonprofit, you have a long road ahead of you. It's an exciting road, but it's a long road ahead of you. It takes some time to really get to this point. In my How to Start a Nonprofit class, or Before You Seek a Grant is what it's called, we talk about the various stages of the nonprofit cycle. If I can think about them off the top of my head, it's the idea stage, the startup stage, and the mature stage. So the idea stage is just where you have the idea and you're thinking about starting a nonprofit. The startup is probably where you are now, where you start, getting your 501c3 and making it legal. And the mature stage is where you've kind of worked your way up the mountain and you're on the top of the mountain now and you have, nice sustainable funding base. But it takes a while to get there. It won't happen overnight. Most of the time we say you should start with individuals because the process for foundations is very competitive. And a lot of times they want you to have a track record and history of success. And a lot of people, my newbies, say, but we don't have a history of success. So that bar can be kind of high for foundations. So, we already said that individuals are going to be the strongest, most long-lasting source anyway. So it's good to really start with individuals.
Now, Kim,
people
let me
in your
ask you
community
this.
that know you. Yes.
Let me ask you this, and along those lines, what do you believe of crowdfunding? Because a lot of people seem to be using that as an alternative as well.
Yeah, I like it. I know some people that are doing that now. My nephew works at the YMCA, and I'm sure they have a strong funding base, but he's trying to raise money for, a project, for a mentoring project that he wants to create. So, he's doing something on, Kickstarter to, just get the program kind of up and running. So,
and would that then be considered like past experience? Like if you're new and you're out there and funders want to see some past history, you could refer to a Kickstarter campaign where you fully funded an endeavor. And I think that would give you some street cred, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. I like the way you said it. You need some street cred. That's true. And I think that's a good way to get the street cred is that way. Because whenever you go to a foundation, especially as a new organization, they want to know who else thinks this is a good idea besides you. That's a really important question. And you have to answer for yourself. So that means your board, that means volunteers, and that means some funding already going into it. So if you can show, well, we've raised X number of dollars from individuals in our community, that's a really strong, good faith effort that people believe in and are willing to support what it is that you're trying to do.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next question. Can you allow a 5 to 10% surplus from grants?
You can, but you kind of need to get their approval up front. So, for example, if it's general operating support, usually for a specific program or project, they don't allow you to carry over money into the next program or project because they just want to see how it went this year before they're going to commit the funds for next year as well. But for general operating support, for those who give general operating support, because some will and some won't, you can just, they typically want to see your general operating budget. And yes, you can put in your general operating budget that we plan to carry over 10%, whatever, it is, of our, current needs. We're going to put aside 5, or 10% of that as a surplus. And so typically foundations are totally fine with that. But that would have to be one of the things that you would have to check out with them first. But most of the time, they're perfectly okay with you having a surplus.
Okay.
Or a reserve. Sometimes, I like to call it a reserve fund.
Yeah.
Which sounds just a little different than a surplus, because a surplus means you got, like, extra money. Where a reserve fund is more like we're holding a little bit aside for a rainy day. Rainy day fund. So either way, though, I think foundations are, like, totally open to that concept and idea, maybe even more so than they have been in the past, because there have been a lot of really good nonprofits that are going under because they don't have the internal capacity to sustain, their good work. So they're definitely much more open to it than they used to be.
Okay, great. Our next question is it possible for a new nonprofit to get a government grant?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's possible to get one from foundations too. So yes, it is. Sometimes just going back on the track record and history of success a little bit, a lot of times, many of the people that I talk to that start nonprofits are not new to their particular field at all. They probably worked in it for a long time, studied it, did it, for a long time professionally, and that's really where they see where some of the weaknesses are and, what they could bring to a nonprofit are things that they learn from experience. And, experience is the best teacher. So a lot of times when I'm thinking about track record and history of success, it could be your own personal history of success. I talked a little earlier about teen moms. And for me, as a funder, if I'm, have a program to, like, decrease teenage pregnancy in a particular school system or community, I would be very interested in, a person who was a teen mom, and has, gone through, like, how difficult it is to finish high school and go to college and all that stuff. And she succeeded, and now let's say she has a master's in social work and wants to start her own nonprofit. To me, that would be the perfect person. So even if she's just starting that nonprofit, her personal history is her track record of success. So really keeping that in mind. And last thing on that, not everybody wants to give to new nonprofits, period. I mean, there are some foundations that I know that only give to organizations that have been around for 15 years. That's just the way it is. They get to decide, if they want to give to new nonprofits or not, and each one is going to be a little different about that. But using our database, there's a type of support called seed money that is, what, nonprofits that do give to startups, that's what they call it. So when you use our database, come to the Arlington Public Library and use our database. Yay! Shout out to the Arlington Public Library. You can come there and use our database for free, and the type of support would just be seed money that you're looking for.
Ah, that's good. That's good advice.
Okay. Looks like we have Time for one more question really fast. Given individual donations is the largest category of giving, do you have any resources to provide guidance on individual development plans?
Yeah, we do have a lot of classes, usually special programs kind of thing, where we do have experts and consultants come in on starting an individual giving program. And that's one of the things that I think we could just do more of. Speaking of our strengths and weaknesses, our SWOT analysis is a lot of times at the Foundation Center we focus a lot on foundation fundraising, and a lot of our funders are even saying, you know, how about some more classes on how to, you know, diversify the fundraising stream. So I know that's one thing I'm working on is, you know, individual giving, doing a little bit more on that. But if you go to grantspace.org, just a little plug for that, and grantspace, the word grant and space altogether.org, and just go to the keyword search and put in, or knowledge base, and put in individual giving, and you'll pull up a lot of resources related to individual giving. Also, if you put earned income, there's a lot of really good information. There's even like a quiz on, you know, how you know if you're ready to start an earned income stream. A lot of good online resources that you can find there about individual giving and earned income.
Fabulous. This has been awesome. We really appreciate everyone's questions. Just as a reminder, the presentation, Kim's presentation, will be available online at the end of this week. We'll send it out to everybody. And just a huge shout out, Kim. We really appreciate you conducting this presentation on nonprofit sustainability. I know I was able to gather one or two tips that I did not know of before, and it was a great, great webinar for us today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And we hope you'll be able to join us again soon at a future nonprofit webinar. And we just love the work with the Foundation Center and Arlington County Public Library. With that, have a beautiful day, and we look forward to seeing everyone soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.